that talk.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the Agents of Recovery podcast. So good to have you here. I want to thank you all for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. Thank you so much for reading the review. I love reading these and being able to understand a little bit more about what you, the listener, need. And I've been bumping into a lot of you really out in public. And it's kind of fun to be able to converse with you about the topics that we've discussed here on the Agents of Recovery podcast. And Brock and Max, before we jump into introductions, brother, you got to know this podcast is getting out there. We are getting lots of feedback. And I want to thank you, listeners, for sharing this with the people that truly need it. That's why we've come together to do this. But as always, Coach Blue Robinson here from Team Addict to Athlete, one of the hosts here, Max Hall, another co-host. How you doing, Max?
I'm doing great, man. It makes me so happy to hear that people are listening.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, Blue. Everywhere I go, I'll run into somebody who will bring it up. And it means a lot because, you know, we put a lot of energy and effort and we're passionate about this stuff. So to get feedback that people are listening and enjoying and learning and it's changing lives, man, that's what it's all about. So I'm pretty proud of us, man. I'm pretty proud of where we've come. So
I agree, Max. And you know what? It wouldn't have been possible if we wouldn't have the visionary here on the Agents podcast, and that's Brock Bevel. Happy birthday, Brock. Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Thank you, guys, man. It's good to be here. Good to be home. And it's good to see your faces, man. I get to see Max more often now, so that's going to be cool.
Exactly. You guys are practically neighbors anyway. You can probably have brunch with each other now and then, can't you? Just down the street, aren't you? That's awesome.
Yeah, we're close, man. Closer than you think.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Listeners, I want to thank you all again. We've gotten a lot of feedback from the podcast, and specifically the tools and the topics that we choose. They really are stuff that we discuss that have been on our minds and on our hearts. And just like last week's episode, we were talking about some of the egocentric things that we do. There was one contribution to that discussion that we wanted to touch more of a base on, and that is the concept of why guys specifically, why men, you know, and it happens with women too, but this is, you know, a male-oriented mindset here. Why in the world do we find ourselves getting caught up in the lies? Lying about things that, try to protect us, lying sometimes when the truth sounds better. Before we started recording, listeners, we were going over a few topics about why men specifically lie. And it boils down, guys, into a few things. One of them is to avoid disappointment. The other is to kind of avoid guilt or shame. And that's a big one because you know that when we're dishonest, that those are the two attributes that we're going to feel the most heavy about. Men also lie because they get convinced that they're actually not lying, that they begin to believe some of the bullshit that they're trying to spew out there. A lot of it, like you've heard, listeners, is to boost our own egos and even to avoid conflict. But really, it's about control. So we're going to jump into some of these topics today to talk about some of these angles and why that self-preservation mode of hiding from the truth makes us, I guess, in the mindset, Brock, of doubling down, tripling down. Because if the truth is discovered, if the reality is felt, especially by someone we love, the possibility of losing that someone is even more great. That's why it is so hard to break this habit. This is something all three of us have struggled with for very specific reasons. But let's jump into this topic, Brock, because you just had an experience with this, talking about this with young men who are out doing some missionary work. And it is a huge problem, specifically with men, because of the stigma and because of the I don't have any problems, I'm carrying the world on my shoulders. Brock, let's start with you, brother. Let's jump into why this is so prevalent among men, specifically in recovery.
Man, in my opinion, it comes down to we're supposed to have it figured out. As men, we're not supposed to be able to be controlled by anything, a substance, a person. And so for me, I can just speak from my experience. I remember that I had lies covering lies that had to cover other lies. And it was funny when you started giving examples of one-way lie. I think at first it's to avoid this guilt and shame. I really do. But then, I don't know if you guys saw this, but it actually started coming over to that became the truth.
Yeah.
And I could tell that story, I could tell that lie over and over. And it wasn't until I found some time in recovery that once I started unraveling that, I'm like, oh my gosh. So one would be early pornography use, right? I would tell myself, you can handle this. You got this, right? 3 worst words in the English dictionary.
Yeah.
You got this, or I got this.
got this.
But what I felt was, because I could stop in short increments, like I could go 2 weeks, I could go a month with willpower. I could even go up to 8 months with willpower. But then it got to the point to where when I would relapse, it would go, I would relapse for like 40 days in a row, right? And then until I got that strength again, okay, you got to stop, you're ruining your family. And then you get back to the point where, or you had an event coming up, like you were going to baptize a child. I remember that. Oh, I have to get right. I have to get ready for this moment. So for those moments, you could get yourself right. But all the other time, you would lie and be deceitful about it. So for me, this is a pretty deep conversation and a pretty cool topic, and I'm glad we're hitting on it, because this is something that we purposefully don't talk about. What do you think, Max?
No, I think I'm sitting here, my wheels are turning, because you're right. What it comes down to, at least for me, when I was in it, is it was easier to just lie.
Yeah.
It just, in my opinion, it was easier. So, number one, if I lied, I wouldn't have to admit that I did something wrong, and I wouldn't have to face any of that guilt or shame, or at least I didn't think I would have to, right? And the biggest one for me, I just didn't want to fight.
Yeah.
I wanted to avoid conflict. Mm-hmm. Like, I want things to be all smooth and all good between me and whoever, my wife or whoever I was lying to. I wanted the relationship to go smooth. So by bringing up drama or mistakes and having to work through that, that just seemed like a lot of work to me. And because of that, I said, it's so much easier for me to just say, no, I didn't do that. And we can move on. What I didn't realize at the time, though, and we talked about how we start believing our own lies, I would get to that point because it's the only way that you can justify lying.
Exactly.
Is that if you actually basically believe what's coming out of your mouth because you know it'll make you feel better about the situation or something. So you start believing that, and it takes away the anxiety of having to admit and then work through it. Oh, now they're going to be mad at me. Now I'm going to be in the doghouse. Like, there's this whole process that's going to have to happen if I tell the truth right here.
Yeah.
Or I just say, no, that never happened. But then here's the problem. But, you say, no, that never happened. I start to believe that, okay? And then it just starts compounding, and you create a habit of lying.
Yeah.
And once you create that habit of lying, it's almost impossible, because that's your first reaction. You're almost triggered to lie right away. Whenever, especially if something got brought to me. Like if my wife was just like, have you been using? Like right away, without hesitation, no matter what, no.
Yeah.
And some of my lies were so unbelievably obvious that I was lying. You know what I mean? So I look back at some of the lies that I told, and I'm like, I'm such an idiot. How could I believe that you believed my lie? Like it's unbelievable, right? So I would look back and just kind of laugh, and just especially to my wife, I'd just be like, I am so sorry. I can't believe that I tried to shoot that at you, and I was so stubborn about it, and I went stomping out of the house, and my ego just got into play. So. That's my thoughts on it. For me, as I look back on it, it was just easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just was easier. I could avoid all this crap, all this shame and conflict. And then I love what you said at the end there, Blue. It is self-preservation,
100%.
right? It's preserving what this image or what I think is going on around me. It's preserving my world, whether that's good or bad, right? Most of the time it's bad. It kept me alive is what I felt like. Mm-hmm. It kept me rolling, and I didn't want to face that. I didn't want to have to come to a crashing stop and face all of it. So for me, that was the biggest thing. And the last thing, I know I've kind of been going off here, but here's the problem. we talk about all the time how thoughts turn to actions, turn to habits, turn to character, right? Well, after I've had this habit of lying, it had become who I was. Like, it was part of my character. I was a liar. And so in recovery, even when little things were brought up that really weren't a big deal, like, hey, did you leave the refrigerator door open? You know?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no, I didn't. Even though I know I did.
Spot on.
And then I would stop and be like, Kenzie, yeah, I did. I have no idea why I just lied. I've no idea why I just told you that lie. But I've developed a very bad habit of doing it. It's become part of my character. So now I got to change everything. I got to go back to thoughts, actions, change my habits, get back in a good routine. And once you start, and I want to talk about this a little bit later about how people will handle an addict lying, but we can get that here in a second. But so anyway, I had to change my character. And once I did, it became easier with practice. But that is a hard habit to break.
Certainly,
right, Lou?
certainly. Bro, go ahead, Brock. I see you.
Dude,
over
I'm
there.
cracking
I
up
see
over
you.
here.
I see you bobbing and weaving. Go ahead, brother.
Dude, I'm bobbing because I'm thinking about what Max is saying and about those lies that we told. You know, what was funny was we use these lies to avoid conflict, just like Max said
100%.
perfectly. But what happens when they come to us with evidence? And I don't want to give away the farm on this one, but there was times where why are you doing, Max? What? Yeah.
Just go.
Listen,
Just go.
when I remember a time specifically when I had sent an inappropriate picture and it came back. And you know, when you send something, there's a date time stamp on it where it originated from. Like, there's evidence, right? You're not. And so it came back. So I got confronted with this. Hey, is this yours?
No.
Nope.
Never seen that before in my life.
Never seen that before. And there's proof. There's proof, right? And I am lying my way. Like, no, I don't. Someone else had my phone, and someone else had your private parts too. Like, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's funny now, but at the time, dude, it was so stressful.
Seriously.
And I remember we lied to avoid conflict, right? But I would be specifically talking about my relationship with my wife. She got to a point where she's like, she threw her hands up. She knew I was lying. I'm lying to the hilt, man. I'm taking this to the grave because I don't want. I know where it's gonna take me. I know if I say yes, that's my picture.
Right.
I sent that from my phone. I know where it's gonna lead. So if I in my mind, that's how crazy and how mentally challenged maybe we're gonna say at the time. And it got to a point to where she didn't want conflict. So she's like, I don't even want to ask you because I know you're going to lie to me. I know you're going to be untruthful. We're going to spend hours and hours fighting about this. You come to me when you're honest. And so it's true, too, that we do the same thing, but our significant others, our family members, they get tired of it, man. They're like, to the point you're like, whatever, dude, you're just a liar. I'm not going to listen anymore.
Exactly. And once you're labeled that, it is the worst tag to try and get away from because you know they're right. And the last thing a liar wants to be labeled is a liar. But that's the thing, Brock. After that, it's like that disappointment. There's so many times that I lied to avoid disappointment, but it always ended up in more flipping disappointment. And so, ladies, when men who lie, they don't always have the intention to hurt you. And I really want you to know that it's not. It's if anything we can kind of translate to today is for you to understand the whys, because people lie because they think that they're not good enough. Maybe they avoid, telling the absolute truth about themselves. And men kind of think that if we do open up and get honest, that we have a potential to lose our loved one. And that's a rough thing because we get caught in a catch-22, right? It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And so we make up lies about, for me specifically, about adventures I'd had, qualifications I had, skills to impress other people, because the reality was I felt like and really at the core was a nobody. And so for me to avoid that disappointment and to boost my own self-confidence by creating this false persona, man, I held on to it. And when it all came crashing down because a trusted friend of mine disclosed everything that I had been trying to hide to Marissa as we were dating, man, my house of cards came crashing down. And when Marissa finally called me out on like, is this true or false? For the first time in history, I was literally speechless. I just sat there looking like a doofus, just like, and it was crazy because, again, trying to avoid that shame and guilt, but that disappointment stuff is real. I mean, you remember what that's like, don't you, Max?
Well, yeah, and I'm sitting here laughing too. That's why I was kind of like I was doing this because I knew exactly where like I can relate. I mean, I've had times where Kenzie's like, I've walked into the kitchen and there's like my little bag of all my stuff, you know, that I thought I had stashed away where she would never find it, and somehow she came across it. She puts it down on the counter, and I'm like, "What's that?
I love it.
What's
man.
that? Where'd you find that?"
Oh man, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not mine. Like, wait, I think I forgot. Like, I forgot that was there. You know, I forgot to throw it away. You know what I mean? Like, you start coming up with all this stuff, and she's just looking at you. But it's just funny that as addicts, we will fight to the end on that lie. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, why is it that even when we know we're obviously caught, we will still just fight to the end to try to preserve it? You know, and then, you know, for me, I'd be like, okay, well, drug test me, you know, thinking that she wouldn't. You know, she's not going to go down to Walgreens and buy a drug test and bring it home. I was like, well, just test me. And then when she goes, okay, and goes down to the store and gets a test, now I'm like, shit, how am I going to beat this test now? Like, you know what I mean? It's just, I'm just fighting to the end. And looking back on it, I'm just like, why? But in my mind, one of the other things that I was thinking about why I lie is I justified to myself, well, I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to hurt my wife. It's better off if she just like, if she didn't know, it's not going to hurt her. So battle till the end. But in reality, it's the opposite. I'm hurting myself. I'm hurting my loved ones because of my lie. And it's going the opposite direction of what I think it's going to go.
So, Brock.
So it's just, it's funny. And, you know, I don't like telling war stories, but people need to understand that the sickness is real. And what you would do to preserve your addiction is you go to any lengths if need be. I mean, I remember trying to beat drug tests, like trying to pound apple cider vinegar, thinking that I saw somewhere online that if I drank a whole bottle of it, it would like cleanse my pee.
I've seen it.
So I'm downing vinegar and a gallon of water, and my literally my piss is just clear as can be, and I still test positive. And I'm just like,
you know what? I've
looking
seen it,
just
Max.
like some of the things that I've done, right?
I've seen it when I was working at the county with you know, the community of Utah County here. There were people that would go as far as to buy this thing called a Whizzinator. It was a fake penis that you could hold clean urine in.
Max, like, I got
And
one.
one of the guys that found that was like, it was completely off color. And I'm like, dude, that's not how genetics work, right? Or you go in there to test somebody else and it smells like Clorox bleach all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, really? You know, Mr. Clean here, huh? And so you're right. Go ahead, Brock.
You're clean from drugs, but you are pregnant.
Yes,
so,
exactly. Yeah. Well, you're due soon. You've seen that one, huh?
dude, seriously, right? I mean, come on, you'd use anybody's urine.
Yeah.
At that time, you're calling your phone in a friend saying, dude, I'm getting tested tomorrow. I just got to get through it. And then you got to worry about hiding it, keeping it to the body temperature, because when we tested, you had the temperature on it. So you're keeping it in. It's just like we go through craziness. So my question is this. What would happen if we just told the truth? Like, what would happen to our story? Would we fall apart? Would we blow up? Would we die? Like, what would happen if we just, like, got honest?
Reality would kick in. All of a sudden, we would have to face that fact that we are an addict, that we are a liar, that we have a problem, that we have the potential to lose something. But I've noticed that's never the case. It never is. Every time I remember working with guys that just are holding onto these lies. And Brock, I read this thing specifically preparing for the podcast that talked about law enforcement. That law enforcement officers, they're not any better than anyone else to detecting lies, but what they can detect is that bullshit meter. Meaning, like, it's the behaviors, it's the small little things, right? And it was talking about how in a crowd, they can pick out the person who's doing something semi-nefarious because of just small little things. So when we're exposed and it's completely ripped out from under us, absolutely, man. It was like, I'm a liar. Like that was the hardest thing for me. That's a great question. What do you think, Max?
So the funny part about that is I went through these schools. I went through REID, in interview and interrogation school. I went through the advanced class, and I was a great investigator. But I'm going to tell you that my wives were better than I was.
Marissa.
Because they sniffed it out. And here I am thinking I'm super covert and I'm being
micro expressions,
I'm maniacal. Right? Man, I got blown every time, man. Like I just wasn't as good as I thought I was at hiding this. And it was just, I got to the point to where I got sloppy. Mm-hmm. Right? My lies got sloppy. My life got sloppy. I couldn't determine what was up and what was down. And I was just, man, I was out of control. And so for me, here's the problem that I had. I took it to the end. I took it to the grave. I took that relationship to the grave, and I never was truthful. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about my first wife, right? Like she's the one that caught on to all, the affairs, the inappropriate relationships, the text messaging, all this stuff. And instead of at the end coming clean and just saying, you're right, for her, right? Because she probably could have used that. I never did. Yeah. I never came clean. I mean, she's heard it on the podcast now. I'm trying to live these amends and stuff like this, but I still have never had that conversation with her. And so I understand what we're saying, but I was willing to take it to divorce, to end the relationship with my kids and family because of all the lies and deceit that I was. And I got caught and all that stuff. And so, but the problem is, if we could issue one warning out there to all the men and women listening, it's, are you willing to lose everything for these lies? Are you willing to keep this cover story until you either time out or you get divorced or whatever happens? But at what point in time do we become real and share it with people?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I have a thought. I was thinking about that, bro, because you're right. And for me, why we battle this thing to the end and why we lie. For me, I wasn't ready to stop. I wasn't ready to face life. And it's going back to self-preservation. I don't want anything to change for with my little secret and what I've got going on right now. I don't want that to stop. I don't want it to change. In my mind, I think I'm doing the right thing of lying about it to not cause friction and holding on to that with some sort of hope that it'll just kind of like go away, that it'll just be brushed under the rug and we'll all just forget about it and let me go about my business. Because if she comes to me and says, hey, I found this stuff, what's going on? If I could say, yeah, you know what, I'm struggling bad and I can't stop using this stuff and I need help. Well, yeah, that would go a lot better than the lies. But now I have to do the work, right? Now I've admitted it. Now it's out there. Now I have to take responsibility for it. I don't want to take responsibility for this yet. I don't want that.
But that's the concept of being a man, right? That's one of the reasons too. It's because we're supposed to have everything together. And if we start looking like we're going to buckle, what faith are you going to have in us for the future even? And so we double down, triple down. I got you. Max, you're spot on.
No, exactly. It changes. In my opinion, it's going to change the perspective on how people look at me. You know what I mean? Now I'm a druggie. Now I'm a liar. Now, you know what I mean? It's just like you're going to get these things thrown back on you, and you're not going to be the same person that you thought you were before. But the problem is you're not. You've changed already, and so that's not going to matter. So the being the man part of it would be now accepting responsibility and getting help. But for a long, long time, I wasn't ready to face that. And it was easier for me to just lie, no matter how bad that lie was. And Brock's right, man. Especially the wives, they know you. I mean, I could try to lie to Kenzie right now about maybe having a surprise birthday party for her. And she would ask me about it, and I would lie, and she would know right away. And I'm like, how the heck do you know that? Like, she's just, I know when you lie. I can tell. I was like, well, what is it? Do my eyes dilate? You know what I mean? Like, what's the signs? How can I? She's like, I can just tell. So for those who are out there, if you're in the middle of a lie, whether that's your pornography or you're cheating or you got substance abuse problems or whatever, I would challenge you to take a deep look. And it's never too late to come clean, in my opinion.
Right.
In my opinion, as deep as you've gotten into your lie, it is never too late to finally just stop and say, you know what? I lied.
Yeah.
And accept responsibility and ownership over that. Because I think even in today's society, people are very, for the most part, forgiving when you come clean and you apologize and you admit that you were wrong and then show some action of what you're going to do next. I know for me, in general, people were awesome with me. Now I was lucky. I got put in a situation to where I had no choice but to tell the truth now. I had no choice because I had no more secret. It was gone. It was out. So I was forced into telling the truth, which is a lot easier than someone stepping up when you don't necessarily have to and saying, yeah, this is what's going on. I've been lying. I was forced into it. So for somebody to just put their foot down doing it, it takes a lot. But what we're trying to say right now is, from experience, it is better. You will be better off in the end by just speaking the truth and taking responsibility for your actions. People will respect you more, they'll love you more, and you have a better chance of saving any type of relationship that you're in with the truth, right? So that's just how it was for me. And it sounds like it's pretty similar for Brock and Blue with some of the stuff that you've been saying. So
Max, let me build on that if you don't mind. So I wonder if we rationalize or minimize where we're at in our process. So maybe we can throw out some questions. Maybe we can ask the listeners, for example, like I know with men that I work with, they throw out these excuses, or maybe not excuses, but these limiting beliefs that they're not an addict. Okay?
Yeah.
For example, hey, listen, I keep my job. I can use, but I can still go to work. I have a job. I just use once in a while. And I can handle this. I'm not an addict. I'm stressed out.
Yeah.
Right? So you hear all these things or hey, I got this. And so I wonder where that threshold breaks, where that changes from, listen, I'm okay. I'm doing okay. I know you're seeing some signs, and maybe in my brain, hey, yeah, man, I'm starting to exhibit some signs of addiction, but we rationalize in our own brain that we're okay.
Oh, yeah.
That we're still maintaining professional life. I'm still getting up, going to work. I still have a relationship. But we're here to tell you guys, that's a slippery slope, because you can slide very fast.
Brock.
So I guess what I think would be cool for the listeners, maybe if we can maybe give them some tools.
Absolutely.
Or maybe even like a rubric of what it looks like if you're an addict. If you're doing this, and this, maybe you're an addict. Or if you're doing, because for me, it was hard. I wasn't really sure if I was addicted or if I was really injured and I needed to take this medication, because I could rationalize that all day, because I could show you my medical records. Look, Max, man, I deserve this. Man, look at this hit. This is why I'm taking it.
I love it, Brock.
I worry that the listeners are like, listen, I'm not there yet. I'm still okay. I got this. And so what would you guys offer up to them folks?
It's that whole concept of the greatest joke the devil ever played was convincing Manny didn't exist, right? Because I think when we get to that point, we think and we believe that we are not lying. We become so justified in some of our actions and our behaviors that it's this fictitious line in the sand we've drawn, that when we cross those, it's just because of and not the reason because of. So, like, think about it for a minute. If we truly believe what we're doing isn't a bad thing, hiding, let's say like pornography use from your spouse, right? and you're thinking, well, I'm viewing this pornography because I don't want to bother my wife tonight. I'd rather not have to, start and initiate it. So if I can go in there and do my thing for 10, 15 minutes, then our relationship will be stronger because she won't think that I'm always about sex. That's not what it's about, right? And then that bleeds into other areas. It's like, well, maybe I'll just start, talking to these old girlfriends, or maybe I'll start inquiring where they're at and stuff. And all of a sudden we begin to believe the lies. See, one of the problems that I had, you guys, specifically on this topic, Brock, was that I had misconstrued my past so much to hide all the emotional pain that there are things I don't really remember if they happened or if I made a story up about it because it was just part of my being. Does that make sense? So it's one of these things where Brock, I think it gets to the point where we forget who we are so authentically that those lies, they've almost become our truth. And listeners, that's a scary, scary thing, right? If we're not able to see the folly in what we're doing and we're waiting for someone to call us out, we are all very lucky to have women in our lives that are strong enough to stand up to it. And to call us out and then to stand by us through the process. But there's so many women that are also very meek. And the more dominant, the more loud, the more forceful, the more gaslit I can make you, the less likely you're going to be able to have this happen. But then I think that bleeds into lying by omission. A lot of us guys just don't say anything. Those are the kind of things where all of a sudden you realize, like, you've had a double family? Like, how did that happen? Like, what's this? Man, Brock, you're speaking the truth. It's hard. And so, guys, it's like, light and dark. You can't tell me that when you're in there looking at porn, or if you're maybe even taking it to another level, maybe now you're starting to act this out with public. Maybe you're starting to get on like dating sites again and all this kind of stuff. You can't tell me that you really believe in your heart of hearts that what you're doing is correct. But it's a hard thing to look yourself in the mirror and call yourself out. Go ahead, Max.
I don't know why I just thought of this, but I saw a video. Everybody, I mean, I'm a Goggins guy. I love David Goggins, okay, and I bring him up once in a while. But I saw a video that he posted the other day, and he talks about how he got up one morning. It was really early. He's getting ready to go for his run, okay, and he looks over at his shoes, and he's like, "Oh man, it's early," and he's like, that inner beast inside of me starts talking. It's early. It's cold. It's okay to take a day off. You know what I mean? And he starts making these excuses in his head. And then what he says is, he's kind of funny, but he's like, I decided to tape record that voice, right? I recorded it. And then after I recorded it, I played it back to myself. And what he says, he's like, I straight sounded like a little bitch, is what he said, right? And it's true. Think about some of the excuses that you make in the moment. But then when you take yourself outside of that moment and you look back at the excuses that you were making, you would think the same thing. Man, I am being a little punk. Like, I can't believe that's what I sound like. It's the same thing when we lie. It's the exact same thing. If you were to record yourself in that lie and what you think your justification is and what reason you have for doing it, whatever that might be, and then you take a step back and you press play on that tape recording, you're going to realize how stupid you sound. You're going to realize how much of a bitch you are. And it hit home with me because it's true. I mean, I do it all the time. I didn't realize how much I do it. And I justify not doing something or justify doing something. But when you take a step back and you think about it, take yourself out of that moment, you're like, holy cow, am I really that weak? Am I really that naive or that dumb to think that people are believing that? And it puts things into perspective. So I was thinking about that actually 2 days ago, and I was talking about it with one of my players. And so it just happened to pop in my head that whether it's an excuse or a lie, I think it's the same thing. And if we would just record that and play it back, we would realize maybe how dumb we sound. And I think it's a good tool that listeners can use and try it. Next time you're struggling getting up in the morning, or next time you lie about your addiction or about your affair or watching pornography or whatever it is that you're doing, take a step back and really think about what that sounds like.
Man, Max, you hit it, man. That is so in depth. If we could record this, I wonder what we would really record. Like, I remember saying, "Well, wife's mad again. I'm gonna go masturbate." Right? It's like,
Yeah.
how do those two get to a point to where they coexist and it makes sense to you? Right? Wife's mad. She's not going to put out tonight. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I worked hard today. I deserve it. I'm going to go look at porn. Like, seriously, if you think about it, that's kind of a weak-minded
100%.
mentality. That's that bitch mode mentality, right? To where we
Yes.
just give in to that voice like, hey, it's nobody's going to know. It's okay. You can hide it again and again and again, and then you get caught on it, and then you're like, no. And then you're mad at them for catching you. Well, you didn't want to have sex with me. You didn't even ask. Yeah. You didn't even give them the opportunity to turn you down. You had already solved the problem in your head because it was easier than having a conversation with your wife.
Do you think it's because we're hiding these emotions, Brock? Because I'm thinking, all right, then what's pushing this? Because you're right. Why is it so hard for us to say, man, I feel like shit today, or I am super depressed, or I'm way in my head today? Why do we try to put on the fake persona, walk around like we have it all put together, being the tough guy, lying our asses off to try and like keep this going for no reason? I love that you brought that up, Max. David's absolutely right. Quit whining. Yeah. Do the heavy lifting. But why are we not? Are we that tired, guys? Or are we that scared? Are we that nervous? What is this? Like, Brock, you bring up a really good point, man. Like, I'm at a
Max,
loss.
you want to go? I can see you chomping. Max is chomping.
No, I'm just nodding to what you guys are saying, and you know, as I think about it, you know, and then you know, Goggins will go on and be like, you know, you can have all these excuses, man. You know, my legs, I ran 15 miles yesterday and I got shin splints and I got this and I got that. And, you know, Goggins, he's just like, okay, so what? So you got sore legs. Let's freaking go. Like, come on. All right. So yeah, maybe you did work hard that day. You had a bad day and all you wanted was to come home and be with your wife. Well, your wife had a crap day and she's tired and you know what I mean? And so then it'd be like, oh, well, that's stupid to me. Well, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go drink. I'm going to go masturbate. I'm going to go do this. Okay? It's just that little voice in your head that if you can pay attention to it and take a step back, you'll realize that your justification and your excuses are not even close to being worth it. Mm-hmm. And they're not even close to being right. Okay? And for me, it hit home. And you know, when I was talking about it with one of my players the other night, you know, we were talking about being a good leader. We were talking about being a good teammate. We were talking about working hard, not making excuses, all that stuff. And I kind of brought him up in this video and all that. And it's so true in so many areas of our life, even outside of addiction. And it's something that I think can be a great tool. So for those listening, I want you to try it. Next time you're making an excuse, I want you to try it. I want you to remember what you were saying in your head, even if you fall to that excuse. Even if you say, look, I'm just too tired this morning. I don't feel well. I'm going to sleep in. You know, we'll get back at it tomorrow. I'll feel better tomorrow. You know what I mean? Let me tell you something. You're not going to feel better tomorrow. Tomorrow's not going to be any different. There's not a day in my life where if I wake up early, I jump out of bed and I feel great. That has never happened to me, right? It is the same thing. I've got to mentally dig deep, get up, and get rolling, okay? I mentally got to dig deep, man up, and tell the truth, because that's who I am and that's what I know I'm supposed to be. There is a little bit of part of a man the freak up in this thing. There really is. Now, people need to understand the addict and how the addict brain works and why they lie and the sickness that happens to them. And they need to understand that, but they don't need to necessarily fully accept it. So there's a difference between understanding why they're doing it but not accepting it, but understanding that I can't get over the top mad at what they're doing because they have a sickness that they're trying to work through. Okay? But we can still hold people accountable, especially ourselves, for doing some of those things. And I think it's very important that there is a little bit of a hard line here. of listening to that inner voice or listening to your real voice of reason. So I appreciate what you guys are saying, because I'm sitting here, the wheels are turning in my head of different things on a daily basis that I could do if I would just record that voice and listen back to it and realize how wrong I am, right?
Looks like we might have dropped him for a sec. He'll come back in. Brock, what are you thinking, man? He's spot on.
Man, I'm shaking over here, dude, because this is good stuff, man. And I want to ask an in-depth question. I want you guys to have to think about this a little bit. When I look back at my addiction, I think let me rephrase that. I know that I took the easy road, and I developed a reward system based on it being easy. Okay, so I want you to think about this reward system. When we would chase the drugs, our reward was that feeling of gratification, like I got the drug. When I'm chasing sex, and when I had sex, that was my reward system, that it was gratification. And I wonder, in addiction, maybe you guys can, this might be a little bit deep for this conversation, but do you think we have trained ourselves to a conditioned response? Okay, we think about Pavlov and ringing the bell. When the bell rang, the dogs would start salivating, right? And then it would drop the food in the dogs. So they conditioned themselves. And I wonder if we have done the same thing in recovery. Like we get anger, we feel anger, and then what is our conditioned response? Like we've always done this. So is it I go use? Because I feel anger, my conditioned response, that bell is now rung, and I have to go use. Yeah. So I wonder if all we're doing is using a negative bell or conditioned response to our behaviors. If someone comes to me, my wife comes to me and asks me a question, and I know I need to lie, I've conditioned myself to tell a lie. Now, can I recondition myself not to?
Yes.
Like I remember in the past, when I felt angry or stressed, it would always lead to pornography. I had to change that conditioned response, and it wasn't overnight that I could change that. Even still, sometimes today, we get in a chippy fight, and I'm like, oh, I need to release. I need something. I need that out. And so what do I do now is I need to go to the gym. I need to go for a run. I got to do something physical because I got to recondition that. Now, how do we teach that? Because we're all doing that today, but how do you teach that to other people? Hey, you need to have another outlet and show them, hey, this is what it looks like now. You get angry, this is what you do. This is your reward.
You are absolutely
How do you change it?
Because what you're talking about, and I'm glad you used Pavlov as kind of like a go-to there, because what he was doing is conditioning behavior. Even getting into the concept of being an addict was moving from someone who was sober to an addict, right? You were conditioned yourself, which means you had to pick up behaviors. Now, behaviors are cool because if you can learn behaviors, you can unlearn behaviors. And this is the coolest thing we're talking about with lying specifically, because Max has brought this up before in the past where, and I've done it, and I'm sure you've done it too, Brock, but Max brought up the point that he would say something to Kenzie and she'd be like, dude, what? And you'd be like, oh, wait a minute. I was wrong there. Or you'd start saying something kind of foolish. You're like, oh, whoa. That's not what I meant. Like you had to catch yourself in the moment. Changing your own behaviors requires some kind of motivation. See, your motivation for going to pornography after the argument was a release, right? So then what's the motivation behind getting honest, right? Well, maybe my wife will be off my back so much, but that turns into internal and external motivations. When you're using, you get that external motivation because you're going to get high, which is going to really get that internal motivation going. So it's kind of a double whammy. So Brock, you're absolutely right. Listeners, changing behaviors are hard. So you're going through this process. If you're like, you know what, I've got to start, climbing up this honest tree here. You've got to do what Max is talking about. You've got to do what Brock's talking about. You've got to catch yourself before you dig yourself that hole. And even if you do, climb out of the damn thing, because if you learn behaviors, they can be unlearned, but it takes that same kind of conditioning, Brock. It takes you sitting down with your spouse saying, hey, look, when you come at me, my initial response is going to be this. Just Just wait. Just say, okay, no, continue. Or it's about helping the other people kind of lead that in too. Because changing behaviors, teaching old dog new tricks, rough, super hard. What do you think, Max?
I think you're right. Sorry, my wheels are spinning.
Yeah,
I got a couple different points, and there's some points that I think I want to bring up maybe for next time, right? But Brock is right. We condition ourselves, right? And that's the kind of the same thing that I was talking about with the actions, the thoughts, the habits and the character. We've developed all these bad habits, and we've conditioned ourselves for certain responses. You guys, this is the number one, in my opinion, the hardest thing about addiction recovery.
Ooh, you're right.
It is the number one hardest thing to do to get sober. And this is it. Anybody can stop using drugs. You can go to a detox, you can go to a rehab, and you can get to where you can stop using drugs. Good for you. Whether that takes you 30, 60, 90 days, you can stop. The hardest thing about recovery is reconditioning yourself to go back into life and deal with emotions and situations that in the past you would always have to use to deal with them. You have a conditioned response to do this if life gets too hard, or if you get too angry, or if you get too depressed. The hardest thing about recovery is I no longer can have this conditioned response to go use drugs. So how do I handle life without that anymore? How do I handle that anger? How do I handle this situation? How do I handle this anxiety, this stress, this big upcoming event that I might have in my life without the comfort and the response mechanism to use drugs to ease that? That's the number one thing, guys. It's the hardest thing about recovery is figuring out how to live life without it.
Boom.
Because of that condition that Brock's talking about that we've developed over time to stuff's getting too hard, let me use because it'll go away. Or at least it'll go away for a while and I can feel good, don't have to think about it. Well, shoot, you come home and you had a bad day at work and you're pissed off, but you come home and your wife's pissed off because the kids are acting like idiots and they're running around the house. So now I'm mad at the kids and I go yell at the kids to get to bed. My wife wants nothing to do with me. She's done for the day. She's going to bed and I'm pissed. Yeah. I just had a shit day. What do I want to do? Man, I want to go drink or use and just zone out. That's what I want to do. What are you going to do if you can't do that? What is your new mechanism to be able to handle those emotions? Because in recovery, you can't go back to that because then off you go again. So how, if I'm going to live my life, what is that? For some, it's the gym. For some, it's going on a drive. Maybe you got a motorcycle you like riding. Go on a ride. You know what I'm saying? Maybe there's a sport you play. Maybe you're into art. Maybe, I don't know what it is. Maybe you like to shoot guns, right? There's got to be something else that you have to replace into your life in order for things to work. And it can be multiple things, multiple situations. But in my opinion, guys, it's the hardest thing to do in recovery. That is recovery to me, right. Is learning how to deal with life without drugs. So the last kind of part that I want to say, and this is what I want to talk about next week, Blue. If I'm an addict and I'm trying to be all in and I'm trying to recondition myself, I'm trying to make new actions and new habits. I want to have a newfound character. Okay? But I'm still going to make mistakes. I want to talk about how the people around us handle that. How the people around us, how the wives and the parents and the families, how do they deal with that? How do they accept that? They're angry too. They're hurt. What's next for us? And I think that's a big part of it as you're trying to get sober. So really quick, if I'm committing to myself that I'm going to be honest about everything, okay? And then when I am honest, my spouse is like negative towards my honesty. Oh, I can't believe you're thinking about that. Oh, I can't believe this. Oh yeah, I really did. I can't believe I married an addict. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, how do we handle it from there? And as addicts, how do we navigate our way through that in recovery to get back into a good place? So I think it'd be something good to talk about next time. Sorry I went off there for a little bit,
Mic
but
drop.
I just really believe that that's the number one thing in recovery. You can work all the steps you want. You can go to all the meetings
All the therapy you want.
But until you figure out how you're going to deal with life sober, it's not going to work, guys, right?
I love watching Brock.
Man.
Brock's just like blown away too.
Dude, I don't need to end it. I don't need to say anything other than I second what Max said, because that is the truth. And those situations are never easy, because your initial response, like we've been trained, is, hey, I'm out.
Yep.
So I think that's a good. So I hope we get into the next step of that, like what's next. Now that I'm here, how do I handle this? Teach me some tools, because I'm struggling.
No, I think you're spot on, Max. That's a great follow-up too. And I think because of the significance behind this episode specifically, listeners, you know that there's times when we do Q&A sessions here. This would be a great one to start kind of tabulating a list of Q&A questions you might want from the Agents of Recovery and submit them to us, because this is the real deal. This is the brass tacks. You hear Brock speak often about giving you the tools to be able to accomplish that monumental task of achieving some sobriety. But this is also for the loved one who's struggling. We want your questions too, because this is what the podcast is for. So Max and Brock, you both did fantastic today. Thank you. I've got Post-it notes all over my desk. I'm going to do a ton of research now. But listeners, you've been well fed. You've got to share this. See, Brock's got them, man. You got a whole page. You've been well fed, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Agents of Recovery podcast. Please reach out, share this with anyone who may be struggling. Listen to Brock Bevel and Chase the Vase podcast. Brock, you spoke about it last time. I've been catching up with a lot of yours during some of my runs I've been doing. You're right. You're pulling some heavy, heavy guests, and I love it, man. So how often, where do they find your podcast?
Chase the Vase podcast, man. Apple, iTunes, wherever you go find it. It's been getting good, man. I love
amazing. The Addict to Athlete podcast can be found on all platforms as well. And for any of you guys who are struggling, you've got two resources here too. Between Brock and I, whose programs are pretty much one and the same, reach out to Brock if you've got something. He does stuff online. He does things that he can help coach you. There's things that you can get involved with, and let's stop the bullshit. Let's start getting real. I love what Goggins said, right, Max? I mean, lean into it. For crying out loud, play the tape back. I want to thank you all for being here again. I love these topics. We're going to dive deep next week, so please tune in and really join us as Agents of Recovery.